Welcome to part 2 of our study on 2 Corinthians. I'm Amber, and this week we are going to be reading through 2 Corinthians 8 through 13. If you weren't with us last week, let's do a quick review. Paul is the author of 2 Corinthians, and in the first portion of 2 Corinthians, chapters 1 through 7, which we covered last week, Paul is really excited about his reconciliation with the Corinthian church. Why did they have to reconcile, you might be asking? Well, there were some false teachers who had come to Corinth and had tried to undermine Paul's authority. And the Corinthians were swayed by their impressive speeches and wealth. So Paul had to try and convince and reveal the truth to the Corinthians about these false teachers. By the grace of God, the Corinthians were able to see through the lies of the false teachers, and the majority of them were restored. In the second part of 2 Corinthians, Paul first talks about generosity, and then towards the end of 2 Corinthians, it becomes clear that there is still a group of the church that still rejects Paul and his teaching. So Paul makes one last effort to win them over and help them see through the lies of these false teachers. But let's start by talking about generosity. One of the reasons is that he's collecting money for the Jewish Christians in Jerusalem. A famine had come through and left a lot of them impoverished. So he saw this as an opportunity to help the churches that he had planted foster generosity. Now, another good reason why Paul was doing this is to unify the different churches across Asia and Europe, the ones that he'd planted. So Paul wanted to help them feel unified, like they were all Christians serving the same God, even though they were in different cities. So he was requesting financial help for the Jewish Christians from these churches. And the third reason is because Paul saw it, and that becomes clear as we read through 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, that generosity is a central theme of the gospel. Jesus giving up so much to come here to earth, to die for our sins. It's an incredibly generous gesture, a gesture that we could never possibly repay, which is at the core of the gospel message. So Paul talks about generosity, and he's disappointed and a little disheartened because the Corinthians had become so consumed and so preoccupied with their whole debacle with the false teachers and rejecting Paul, and then, oh wait, no, now we see that we were wrong, that they had forgotten to take up a gift for the Christians in Jerusalem. So Paul doesn't just see this as, oh, we forgot, but he sees the heart behind it, sees it as a preoccupation with self. And so he takes this as an opportunity to use some financial metaphors to help them understand why generosity is so important to the gospel and why their generosity is so important as Christians to represent that. He does, however, go out of his way to make sure that he makes the point that generosity is not something to be done by compulsion or to feel pressured into, but that it is something that needs to be done voluntarily. Just as free will is an important aspect of the gospel, you can't force salvation on someone. They have to voluntarily decide to receive that gift. Generosity isn't something to be forced on something, or to be forced on someone, but it's something that we are to voluntarily partake in. It's something that we are to use our free will to choose. I know that I've had some generosity wins and some generosity failures, times where I've really just totally missed the mark and not been obedient to what God was actually calling me to do. And one of those stories that comes to mind was a time that I was at Costco, and I was checking out behind this lady, and she had a cart full, as most people do when they're at Costco. And there was a lot of groceries, just by looking at them, and obviously you don't understand why people are buying everything they're buying, but by looking at the groceries, you could tell there were quite a few necessities on the list. Eggs and butter and different things like that. And then there were a few more fun things that you could tell maybe were treats or things that she was just trying out. And as the cashier was, checking each item out, she was watching very intently on the amount of her bill go up and up and up. And as it got to the end of the aisle where there were the kind of the more fun items, the cashier like checked one and then she asked what her total was, and then he checked another and she asked what her total was. I could tell she was really like on a budget. She had a certain amount of money she could spend and she couldn't spend any more. And she had to ask him to remove a couple of the things. And she made this comment about this juice box deal that she wanted to try, and she'd been wanting to try, but oh well, it was going to have to get left for another time because it just wasn't going to make the cut this time. And I felt like you should just buy that for her, but I talked myself out of it. I don't even remember what I thought at the moment. I don't know if I was embarrassed. I didn't want to like draw attention to that or make her feel bad like she couldn't get it, but I felt like you should just get that for her. I had an extra $20 in my wallet, and even if I would have had to charge it, I could have done that. But instead I just dismissed it because I didn't want to make a deal out of it. And I remember that vividly because I honestly believe I was supposed to buy it for her, and that was God that was prompting that, and I didn't. And it stuck with me because I was disobedient. And I dropped the ball on that one. So generosity doesn't always look like giving to a cause, but sometimes it's just keeping our eyes open for those opportunities when we're at the coffee shop or the restaurant or out with a friend, being willing to pay for the bill. So I want to encourage you guys to keep generous eyes, be looking for those opportunities, because really at the heart of the gospel is a story of generosity. Now, in the conclusion of 2 Corinthians, starting in chapter 10, you can tell that he goes on the defense a little bit more. It's clear that there's still a group of Corinthians that reject him and his teachings. And so he starts to defend his ministry and himself. And this is the part of 2 Corinthians where we get a really excellent autobiographical, once again, very enunciating that word because it's a tongue twister, a lot of autobiographical information on Paul, the most out of any of his letters that he wrote. And he's doing this in a way of defending himself. And you can tell that he's sort of embarrassed by it. Like, he's like, really, guys, you're going to make me have to do this in order to show you that what I'm doing is the work of Christ. I really don't want to do this because it seems like I'm boasting about myself. But if you need to know my credentials, if you need to know the credentials of my ministry and the credentials of myself, I'm going to tell you. But I would rather be boasting about Christ and not myself, is sort of the attitude that he takes. And that in reading through the last section of 2 Corinthians, it reminded me of a Casting Crowns song that I really, really like. That the first time I heard it on the radio, it really just hit home. And it's called Only Jesus. And a few of the lyrics from that song are this: I don't want to leave a legacy. I don't care if they remember me. Only Jesus. And I've only got one life to live. I'll let every second point to him. Only Jesus. It takes a lot of humility to want Jesus to be the thing that people remember most about you. I know I'm not there yet, but I do strive for that. This is the desire in my heart, that I continue to grow closer to Jesus, that just as Paul wanted to boast in Jesus more than anything else in his life, any other accomplishment, I hope that one day that's the ultimate desire, that I want to boast in Jesus more than anything else. So this week, as you're going through your reading, I really want you to be challenged by two things. First, how can you have generous eyes? How can you be looking for people in your life to give to? And second, what is it that's standing in the way between you wanting Jesus to be the ultimate thing that people know you for? What do you want them to know you for more than Jesus? So wrestle with those two questions, and I'll be wrestling with them too, and enjoy 2 Corinthians. Bye.